Hey, I didn't see you there. I was hunting for morels. They're a mushroom that's native to Michigan that people love to eat here in the state. Spring is the best time to be in the woods. It goes from a dull brown gray and explodes in the spring to these beautiful greens and flowers and everything that just turns the forest a different color. It's gorgeous. So today I was out looking for morels. We noticed that the forest floor starts to come alive. The grasses, the plants, the flowers, the mosses, the ferns, little trees actually start to sprout, looking for that sunlight. If you can remember back in the fall, those helicopters that fall from the trees, they actually go into the ground and they're seeds. And you can actually find those little tiny maple trees that are growing out of the dirt from those helicopters in the fall. It's just a fantastic time to be in the woods. As you can see, I'm standing in a field of trillium flowers, and it's all over the place, as you can see. In today's science lesson, we're going to talk about trees. That's our focus today. We've learned about chlorophyll and leaves from Mrs. Gerard's videos, and we learned about how plants get their nutrients from Mr. Madley's videos. We're going to focus all of those videos on what the trees are doing. I like to think of the trees as the guardians of the forest. They provide cover and shelter and shade for animals and other plants, especially us humans. Some trees provide fruits and food and wood and paper for us, and they are very beneficial, primarily because they provide oxygen for us to breathe. And that's a little bit about what we're gonna discuss today. So trees are young and old. They start anywhere. They're found on every continent on the globe, with the exception of Antarctica. And they're very, very diverse. There are plenty of different types of trees. Forests that you see here in the state of Michigan don't exist in South America or Brazil or other parts of rainforests, as opposed to some of the very northern parts of our world that have different types of trees because it's colder and they need different things to let them survive. So we're going to learn a little bit about trees. We're going to read something really quick and we'll come back and discuss. So I'm standing here next to a very, very tall oak tree. How do I know that it's an oak tree? I've looked at the ground and I've noticed that there's acorns on the ground from the fall. So I do know that this is an oak tree. Do I know how old it is? No, I don't. But if I cut it down, I could probably determine how old it is. We'll talk about that in a minute. I'm touching the most important part of a tree, I think. It's the bark. We all know about bark. Bark comes in different shapes and sizes, different thicknesses, different colors, okay? But the bark is the most essential function of a tree. Why? It protects the tree from insects and birds. It allows the inside of the tree to do what it needs to do while protecting it from the elements on the outside of the tree, okay? So, the tree has roots. You can see at the bottom here, if you focus down, thank you, you can see these giant roots that are growing away from the bottom of the tree, okay? Why do we need those roots? Why does this tree need these roots? Two reasons. Number one, it needs it for stability. There is no way a tree this size grows this tall by having no roots. These roots grow out and they grow down. Oak tree roots actually go way down in the ground for stability reasons. Okay? It also, for the second reason, grows out and down because it needs two things: water and nutrients from the soil. Okay? And what that does is it lets the tree grow, and it pulls all of that water and nutrients up, so the flowers way up at the top, or sorry, the leaves way up at the top actually bloom and grow every summer. So you saw in Mr. Malley's video, and the plant did the same thing. This does the same thing. We're going to talk about layers of bark here in a second, and layers of the tree. But that water, just like in Mr. Malley's video, that water is going right up the middle of this tree, so it gives food for the leaves way up at the top of the tree, so they can bloom, and then they can make oxygen for us using chlorophyll. Okay, so we talked about the trunk and the bark. Okay, this is the trunk. We talked about the roots. There's a couple things up top. We call the top of a tree the crown of the tree. The crown has leaves, twigs, and branches all located within the crown. The crown basically gives us the cover and the shade that we like. Also gives us the color that we like in the flowers and the fruit and the leaves. So, and also that's where most of the sunlight occurs. So that's why this tree is so tall. It allows the sun to come down and do its thing in the leaves with chlorophyll. Okay, so that's where all the food comes from, and that's a benefit to us. Now, as I told you before, bark comes in different shapes and sizes. I'm standing here next to an oak tree, which, believe it or not, is a totally different tree right next to this giant one. It's a very, very small, different type of tree. And it has very, very, very smooth bark, okay? Now, actually, this tree will grow and the bark will change over time, but that's okay. That's what it's supposed to do. So there are many different types of trees. If you went out to your local Michigan DNR office or conservation office, they can tell you different types of trees. They have plenty of programs to identify different types of trees. As a matter of fact, in Mrs. Gerard's leaf video, she actually gave you some different types of leaves for trees that are here in the state of Michigan. So you can go out and maybe try and find some of those. So I think I covered all of the different types of trees, parts of the tree. So I want to take a minute and show you some pictures of some of the other things that you can find in your local forests. So the last thing I want to talk about real quick is what's going on inside the trunk of a tree. Okay, so I have a cross section here of a log, and I want to show it to you up close. So what we have here is the different layers of a larger tree. On the outside, you can see, because this was cut down a long time ago, that the bark is starting to peel from the outside of the tree. But the outer layer obviously is the bark. Now, if you were get it a little technical, there is an outer and an inner bark, and but we're not going to get into that today. So this is the bark, and there's a really thin layer called cadmium that's right on the outside of the tree, inside the bark. Okay, it's a very, very thin layer. That's all the new growth of the tree, and that's when you can see that there's these different rings inside the tree. Those very outermost rings is the cadmium, where that's where the growth of the tree exists. On the inside of that, we have the sapwood. This is where all of the work happens. All of the water and the nutrients come up and down. They go up the tree from in here, and they are living. Now they start to die off, and they become the heartwood. This is all this stuff, the darker part in the tree. And this heartwood right here becomes, they call it dead, it dies, but it actually hardens, and that's why trees stay upright, and they are the backbone of the tree. And then right here in the very, very middle is called the pith. The pith itself is where the most nutrients flow, and the nutrients actually the nutrients are in the very middle, and they're protected by all this stuff on the outside from insects and animals and everything else. That's where everything occurs right there. So there you go. That's what a cross section of a tree looks like, and there you go. So speaking of trees, right? You can do your part. You can go to your local conservation office or DNR office and actually buy trees and plant them yourself. The other day, my son behind the camera and me, we planted these little saplings. They're a white pine, and we planted 2 rows for this farmer all the way down the row to prevent soil erosion. So it helps the farmer and it helps nature. We planted 500 trees down this row. Good. Hey, it's me again. I wanted to take a picture and show you exactly what happens when you plant pine trees. This is a field of pine trees that is only 4 years old, and they're already as tall as Mr. Petras. Some of them, at least.